Catch Me If You Can, the unbelievable true story of Frank Abagnale Jr. What if I told you that one teenager with no degree, no experience, and nothing but a cheap suit and a dazzling smile managed to con the world? He wasn't just a pilot. He was a Pan Am pilot who flew over 2 million miles for free. He wasn't just a doctor. He was a supervising pediatrician at a Georgia hospital. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a prosecutor in the Louisiana Attorney General's office, and he did all of this. All of it before he was legally old enough to drink. This is the story of Frank William Abagnale Jr., the Skywayman, the master forger, and perhaps the most audacious impostor of the 20th century. It's a story so wild it became a blockbuster movie, but the truth, or at least Frank's version of it, is even crazier than Hollywood could imagine. This isn't just a story about fake checks. It is a story about a broken home, a desperate search for identity, and the global game of cat and mouse, where the cat, an obsessed FBI agent, was always just one step behind. How did a 16-year-old kid pull it off? And how did he get caught? Part 1. The broken mirror to understand the con man. You have to understand the boy Frank Abagnale Jr. was born in 1948 in New Rochelle, New York. For his early life, things were perfect. He was the beloved son of Frank Abagnale Sr. This French was his son's hero, a charismatic, successful local businessman, a pillar of the community, and a man who understood the power of image. Frank Sr. taught his son a vital lesson. The Yankees always win, Frank, he'd say, because the other teams can't stop staring at the pinstripes. The message was simple: appearance is everything. People see what you show them. Young Frank was a fast learner. When his father gave him his first car and a gas credit card to get to his part time job, Frank Jr. saw an opportunity. He devised his first con. He'd use the card to buy tires, batteries, and other car parts, then immediately return them to the gas station for cash. The gas station attendant got a cut, and Frank got the money. But Frank Sr. was the one who had to pay the bill. When the collections agent finally cornered him, the bill was over $3,400. A fortune in the early 1960s. This wasn't just teenage mischief. It was a sign of things, and worse, the perfect family portrait was cracking. Frank Sr.'s business ventures, built on charm and shaky finances, were collapsing. The IRS was chasing him for tax evasion. The money dried up, the pinstripes were fading, and the pressure destroyed the marriage. When Frank was 16, he was brought into a family courtroom. The judge looked down at him and said the words that would change his life forever. Your parents are getting a divorce. You must choose who you are going to live with, your father or your mother. Frank was devastated. He adored his father, but he loved his mother. He couldn't choose. He couldn't face the reality that his perfect life was a lie. So he did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He bolted straight out of that courtroom, and for the next 5 years he never stopped running. He ended up in New York City with just $200 in his checking account. He was 16, but he had a crucial advantage. He looked much older with his 6-foot frame and a touch of gray in his hair. He easily passed for 26, but his age was also a problem. He had no education and no RV something. He got a job as a stock boy, but he quickly realized he couldn't survive. He needed more money fast. He started writing bad checks, but that was a dead end. His checks would bounce. He was smarter than that. He learned to kite checks, opening new accounts at different banks, writing checks from one to cover the other, always staying just days ahead of the system. But it was stressful. People looked at him, a 26-year-old man in a stock boy's uniform, and they were suspicious. He was overqualified for his poverty. He needed a better uniform. He needed those pinstripes his father talked about. One day, standing outside a New York hotel, he saw them, a Pan Am crew. The pilot, tall and confident in his crisp navy blue uniform, walked through the lobby, flanked by elegant flight attendants. Frank watched as the pilot cashed a personal check at the front desk without a second glance from the clerk. He watched as people turned their heads, their faces filled with admiration and respect. In that moment, Frank Abagnale Jr. didn't just see a pilot. He saw a god. He didn't know the first thing about flying a plane, but that didn't matter. He knew how to get a uniform. And once he had the uniform, he knew the world would believe he was a pilot. His next con wasn't going to be for a few $100s. It was going to be for the sky itself. Part 2. The Skywayman Frank Abagnale Jr. had his target, the crisp, authoritative uniform of a Pan Am pilot. It was more than a costume, it was a key that could open any bank vault, unlock any door, and lift him out of his life as a teenage runaway. But there was a problem. You can't just buy a Pan Am uniform at a department store. They are custom, made for employees. So Frank did what he did best. He lied brilliantly. He called Pan Am corporate headquarters. In a smooth, confident voice, he explained that he was Captain Roberts, a pilot based in San Francisco whose uniform had been lost by the hotel cleaners. He had a flight in the morning and needed a replacement fast. The helpful employee apologized for the hotel's mistake and told him exactly where to go. The official Pan Am uniform supplier in New York. But he wasn't done. He walked into the supply store, looking the part when they asked for his employee ID number. He acted embarrassed. "I left it at the hotel," he'd say. He charmed the clerk, forged a requisition form, and walked out with a custom-tailored, multi-$100 uniform. Pan Am would be billed for it. Frank put on the uniform. He looked in the mirror. He wasn't Frank the runaway anymore. He was Frank Williams, a co-pilot for the most glamorous airline in the world. He had the pinstripes. But the uniform was just a shell. He needed the credentials. He needed the most important part, the Pan Am employee ID badge. This he couldn't fake, not without seeing one up close. So he posed as a student reporter for his high school newspaper, a school he hadn't attended in a year. He called Pan Am's PR department, asking to interview a pilot for a story on the future of aviation. Pan Am, loving the positive press, set him up with a pilot. Frank, notebook in hand, asked about routes, planes, and schedules. Then his key question: with all this security, what does the pilot's ID actually look like? I've always wondered. The pilot, proud of his status, handed it over. Frank studied it. The font, the layout, the laminated plastic, but he had a problem. The iconic blue and silver pen and globe logo. It was impossible to replicate. Or was it? Frank went to a local hobby shop. He bought a scale model kit of a pen and Boeing 707. And right there on the decal sheet was his answer. He carefully peeled the perfect tiny Pan Am logo from the model kit, affixed it to an ID card he'd printed at a specialty shop, and laminated the whole thing. It was crude, but from a distance it was perfect. He had the uniform, he had the ID. He still needed one more thing, an FA. This was his most audacious move yet. He didn't try to fake one. He walked into an FAA office in his uniform and told the clerk he had lost his license. The clerk, seeing a flustered pilot, was happy to help. They couldn't find his fake name in the system, but Frank charmed and pressured them. They eventually gave him a temporary paper certificate. It was a real government-issued document. At 17 years old, Frank Abagnale Jr. was now, in the eyes of the world, a fully licensed airline pilot. And he had never even set foot in a real cockpit. Now, Frank never intended to fly the planes. That would be suicide. He wanted to ride them. He quickly learned the magic word of the airline industry: deadheading. Deadheading is when a pilot or flight attendant from one airline needs to get to another city for a flight, so they ride for free in the jump seat of another airline's plane. Frank, in his perfect uniform, would walk to the gate of any airline. To a Eastern dentist flashes fake panning. M&D and his real fast certificate didn't say the magic words. Frank Williams, Pan Am, need to deadhead to Rome. Got a flight out in the morning. The gate agents, deferential to a fellow airline employee, would nod and stamp his ticket. For the next 2 years, Frank Abagnale Jr. lived in the sky. He flew over 2 million miles. He visited 26 countries. He stayed in the finest hotels, ate the best food, and was surrounded by beautiful flight attendants. All of it paid for by Pan Am. But the travel was just a perk. The real goal was the bank. In every new city, you'd walk into a bank. The uniform did all the work. Who would ever question a pilot? He was the ultimate symbol of trust and responsibility. He began to perfect his primary con: check fraud. He wasn't just cashing bad checks anymore. He was making them. He learned about mica ink, the special magnetic ink at the bottom of checks. He bought a printing press. He could forge a perfect corporate payroll check in minutes. He'd walk into a bank, flash his pilot's ID, and cash a fake Pan Am payroll check for $500. Then he'd go to another bank, and another. He was a shark moving through the water, collecting thousands of dollars a day. But the pilot con had one massive, terrifying flaw. What happens when you are in a cockpit, flying at 30,000 feet, and the actual pilots start talking to you? Frank lived in constant terror of being exposed. He would deflect questions, claiming he was just a paper pilot from the office, or that he'd just come from a rice dye and was too tired to talk shop. Then came the day the inevitable happened. He was in the jump seat, and a senior pilot turned to him, making small talk. "Hey Frank," the pilot said, "what is our V-sub?" When on this takeoff, Frank froze V-sub. When it sounded like gibberish, he had no idea. He laughed, trying to play it cool. "Oh, you know, I always leave that stuff to the guys up front." The pilot gave him a long, strange look. The illusion was cracking. Frank realized the pilot persona had an expiration date. He had to get out. He had to disappear from the skies before he was arrested, or worse, accidentally asked to fly the plane. He needed a new identity, one that was just as respected, but one that kept him firmly on the ground. He retired from Pan Am and moved to Atlanta, Georgia. He was still a teenager, but he was already a seasoned criminal. As he looked for his next opportunity, he happened to fill out a rental application. Under previous occupation, he wrote, pilot. Under new occupation, unsigned, just good. He looked around, saw the doctor, this hospital complex where he hoped to live, and on a whim he wrote, "Doctor." He had conned the skies. Next, he would try to